Um, Hello, everyone. So today we'll be having a debate, or let's say a discussion about the role of Kerala in Indian social reformation. Just waiting for everybody to join, and then we'll start the live. I'm sorry, there's some technical issues. Just a few minutes.
Hello.
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 Yes.
Should we just
Yes.
start?
Yes. We can start. Okay. Uh, so we'll be talking in English for now, but we can use a mix of English and Malayalam. And the audience can actually tell us if they prefer English or Malayalam, and we will switch accordingly. Okay. So today's discussion is going to be about the role of Kerala in Indian social reformation. So before we start this discussion, I have something to say. Uh, we're not blaming. So through this discussion, we will be talking about some social evils that existed in Kerala and how we overcame it, and the people behind this reformation and the history of that in general. Okay, but in no way is that a blame on the current generation of people who are living in Kerala right now, because we have changed. We are not the same society that we were 2 centuries ago. We have changed quite drastically, I should say. So it's not a reflection of who we are now, but we are just trying to understand our past so that we learn from these mistakes and we never repeat them. So this is actually similar to the discussion regarding slavery in the US, because a lot of people get offended talking about slavery in the US, but actually it's a very serious topic. It's not that there is slavery anymore, but slavery was abolished in 1863. Regardless of that fact, some practices have continued, which actually, result in this continuation of certain practices, discriminatory practices towards this modern age. So it's necessary to understand what led to slavery and what were the conditions, of people that they faced at that point. So we need to understand these things so that we don't repeat these mistakes, and we can also change our society to make it more egalitarian. So this is similar in when we talk about India as well, because as we know, we had a caste hierarchy and we had a social hierarchy, which was brutal for the people at the lowest part of society. So i i legally, we can say, as per the Indian Constitution, every citizen is the same and there's no caste discrimination. But you can still see that there are some remnants of that era. It's not as much as before, of course, but you can see that there are some remnants of that era which still persist today. So that's why it's sorry. So that's why it's necessary to talk about social change. It's necessary to understand the historical facts behind what happened in Kerala and in India in general. So we need to study our history because it's necessary to understand about the past so that we don't make the same mistakes again. Now, Kerala, when we talk about Kerala and specifically, it's kind of different from the rest of India, because you can see that in the rest of India, most of the social reformation movements were spearheaded by the upper castes, and most of this happened during the colonial era, let's say. So why was this important? So you can think of it this way, that our society had practiced these hierarchies for centuries together, but then new ideas came to us when with the advent of colonialism. When we came across new ideas, from other people, from people coming from faraway lands. We were exposed to ideas that we had never seen or heard about before. So this inspired, I should say that there were obviously brutal sides of colonialism, but this was also an exchange of ideas, an exchange of human values, right? So many of the values that we got were actually linked to the values persisting in the Renaissance period in Europe, actually. So you can see that with the French Revolution, the lower classes actually revolted against the upper classes, and they established a more egalitarian society. So these kind of values came to India through colonialism as well. So with the bad things, we also had some good things, which include this exchange of information. Um, so if we just go back to the ancient age, we can say that if you look at the Sangam era, for example, there was no caste system as we discussed in one of the previous live sessions. There was no caste system as per the Vedic Chaturvarnya at that time. But you can still see that there was a hierarchy because there are some documents which state that even in the first century AD, you can see that there was a division of labor amongst different communities and there were hierarchies. So some jobs were considered to be more pure and some were considered to be more impure. So this sort of hierarchy exists all over the world. And so that's why it's necessary to understand the mechanism, the social mechanisms of how these systems came into place, systems where one community can exploit another community, and how it just persisted through their birth. So, for example, if you're born in slavery, then you are deemed to be a slave for the rest of your life. That was the situation even back when you look at the slave trade, transatlantic slave trade, and even the slave trade in the Arab world and even in Africa. You can see that if you were born as a slave, then your life would be lived as a slave. So this was again a birth system. Like if you were born into that slavery, then you will continue to be a slave for the rest of your life. And when we talk about slavery, we often conveniently ignore the fact that many of the bonded laborers in Kerala and in India, they were actually slaves as well. So there were an estimated 4 lakh slaves in Kerala during the middle of the 19th century. So we need to understand that it was also kind of a slavery because they didn't get wages for what they were doing. They barely got food. They barely got rations for what work they were doing out in the field and for their masters who they were not even supposed to go near, in fact. So you can call this as a sort of slavery. And how we started two centuries ago from this madhouse, as Vivekananda called it, of caste and hierarchy and discrimination. We started from that point, and now Kerala is one of the most highly developed states in India. You can see that our Human Development Index is 0.752, which is actually greater than Indonesia and Egypt, and it's actually close to China because China is at 0.76. So we are actually close to China when it comes to the Human Development Index. So that's because of our systemic change that was introduced, especially in the second half of the 20th century, and actually the 20th century in general. So we will be talking about some of those movements today, and to see how Kerala started off in a very bad place as a madhouse of caste and discrimination and religious violence. And we started from that point, and now we are one of the most egalitarian states in India. So Joel is here with us today. He's the head of Kerala history, and we will be discussing more about these aspects of Kerala history today, the social reformation aspect. So we will be talking about a lot of great personalities who contributed to Kerala's resurgence, Kerala's renaissance, you can say in a way, because the renaissance in Europe happened in the 16th and 17th centuries. But in Kerala, you should say that it happened in the 19th and 20th centuries. That was the period of renaissance in Kerala. So we will be talking about that today. So over to Joel. You can start.
Thank you, Prajit. I feel like everything that had to be said in today's live session, he summarized so beautifully with under 10 minutes. So now I'm actually scared to talk about like what I've prepared. So anyway, it's good to be here. And today I think we are going to touch upon how the caste system or how brutal the system was in Kerala. And I think we'll see a few reformers who try to protest against this, and we'll try to bring it to an end. But this is going to be the start of many more live sessions that is going to come, which is going to talk about how Kerala was a prominent place. Kerala has a prominent space while we talk about Indian social reformation. In historical writings of contemporary era, we seldom see the role of Kerala in the social reformation that has happened in India. Like I have studied my entire life in my schoolings in national boards, and the only names that we see from Kerala or South India is, I think, Srinarayana Guru or some other names, which is handful. Many times when we think about social renaissance in India, we try to connect it with, we have a tendency to connect it with renaissance of Bengal, the Bengal renaissance, which took part in mid 19th century, which was a blend of teachings of Upanishads and to create a Hindu public opinion against the social evils and Western education and politics, which was written in a book which was published in 1946. So, in that context, we have to analyze and we have to see what is the role Kerala had as such in Indian social renaissance. Before we say that, why it is important in today's context is a question that we need to ask ourselves. As I was preparing for this session yesterday night, I come across a horrible video of a college mocking B.R. Ambedkar and the caste reservation system, a private university in Bangalore, mocking B.R. Ambedkar and caste reservation. So it still shows the idea of caste is still somewhat hidden behind us, but we have come a long way, as Prajit T rightly mentioned in the start of the speech. We have come a long way from where we were and to where we are. So I think in the next, I don't want to take so much time, in the next 30 minutes, I'm going to take a bird's eye view on the scenario that existed and how people managed to liberate out of this. So, and then when we trace back to the history of Kerala, we can see how much of caste identity or caste was there in Kerala. Like when we trace the history of caste in India or caste in Kerala, many historians suggested that it was with the arrival of Aryans that a caste system emerged, and there were three varnas according to the according to many sociological theories. They said that due to division of labor, three caste system emerged. First, a caste system between Aryans and Dravidians originated. Then a caste system between all these job specification originated. But when we see that we have mainly three main varnas, like three varnas, which is Vaishyas, Brahmanas, and Kshatriyas. But when we come to Kerala, or not just Kerala, when we take Indian context, what is so bad is that the system of ITM, or meaning body which is not clean, existed in Kerala. ITM is basically a social division which comes, ITM is a social tool or a social practice where a person of lower caste can pollute, or a person of lower caste can pollute a person of higher caste, or a person of higher caste coming in contact with a lower caste can pollute. So it basically means people of lower caste were considered that their body was so unclean that if they go near a higher caste person, the higher caste person becomes unclean. So how diabolic that system is, we need to analyze ourselves. Sitting in 2023 with mobile phones and technologies in our hand, we might like, I see these things happen. But when we trace back, this was a reality. Many people were denied access to road because they were from a lower strata and they were considered that their body was unclean. So, in order to explain what ITM is, places like Tata had a ITM towards example, in the top we have Brahmanas, then we have Nayars in Kerala's context. So there was an ITM between the first two castes and the second and third class. ഇതിന്റെ ഒരു ഐക്യ സമ്പ്രദായം കേരളത്തിൽ ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു. Am I audible?
Hello.
ചേട്ടാ
Yeah, you're audible.
cool. So ഇതിനകത്തൊരു ഡിഫറൻസിയേഷൻ, ഇതിനകത്തൊരു എക്സെപ്ഷൻ ഉണ്ടായിരുന്ന എന്താണെന്ന് പിന്നെയും നമുക്ക് പറയാനാണെങ്കിൽ, ഇഫ് എ നായർ വിമൻ were excluded from the idea of aityam if she was having a physical relationship or a sexual relationship with a Nambudiri. So in that case, aityam was not considered. But if that same nair women had when it touched Brahmin women, there was aityam. So how the caste system was playing for personal benefit is one thing that we need to consider, and it is actually quite funny when we think about it. So നമ്മൾ ആദ്യം ഒരു കൂടുതൽ നമ്മളുടെ ഈ ഒരു ടോപ്പിക്കിലേക്ക് കടന്നു പോകുന്നതിന് മുമ്പ് നമുക്ക് ബേസിക് ആയിട്ട് അണ്ടർസ്റ്റാൻഡ് ചെയ്യേണ്ട ഒരു കോൺസെപ്റ്റ് ആണ് ഐക്യം എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ. ഒരു മേനി, ഒരു അശുദ്ധമായ മേനി എന്നുള്ള ഒരു അർത്ഥത്തിലാണ് ഐക്യം വരുന്നത്. ഐക്യം രണ്ട് താഴോട്ടും മുകളിലോട്ടും ഒരുപോലെ ഐക്യം ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു. ഈ ഐക്യത്തിനെ പറ്റി നമ്മൾ പറയുമ്പോൾ നമ്മൾ മനസ്സിലാക്കേണ്ട ഒരു കാര്യം, ഐക്യ ജാതികൾ എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ താഴെ തട്ടിലുള്ള ജാതികൾ, those who were considered in the lower strata were called Tindal Jadi. That is, they could even pollute people of higher caste if they even come within the same parameter as a higher caste person. So I have heard stories, or I have read stories where people used to wear bells like animals and walk, because if a lower caste person was coming and if a higher caste person was coming together and they hears the bell, they would shout, "Move away," and the lower caste person were meant to move away. And there were instances of them carrying water to wash away the pollution that they basically created. And another thing that we can see is that even terminologies were created in such a way that this caste hierarchy was existed. So the food that higher caste men or higher caste people eat was called amrita, which basically roughly translates to English as elixir. And what lower caste people were eating were called karikadi, which basically translates to black brew. And even in naming of a person, this aityam or this caste hierarchy was so visible. For example, the lower caste people were working in the fields and other areas as slaves to higher caste men. And it was the right of the higher caste person who is the honor of the slaves, or the honor of these slaves, honor of the slaves. It was his right to name the kids, or the father who gave father or mother who gave birth to the child. So basically, ഈ ഒരു ഐക്യ ജാതിയോട് കൂടെ വന്നതാണ് ഈ ഒരു സ്ലേവറി എന്നുള്ളൊരു കോൺസെപ്റ്റും എല്ലാം ഒരുമിച്ചുള്ള ഒരു കോണ്ടെക്സ്റ്റിലാണ് നാം കാണേണ്ടത്. സോ ഈ ഒരു കാസ്റ്റ് ഹൈറാർക്കി ഒരു ഐക്യത്തിന്റെ പറയാനാണെങ്കിൽ, if a nair meets a puller on the highway by accident, he cuts him down like other cut down a unpleasant animal. So ഒരു higher caste ആയിട്ടുള്ള nair men, this is actually credible written sources. So if an actual higher caste nair man sees a puller man or women crossing his way, he was allowed to chop him down or kill him instantly like he would kill an animal. So that was a brutality that we used to live in. And while we speak about aityam and all the other aspects, one thing we should know is that pollution by approaching a Muslim, Christian, or Jew is not absorbed, but the touch was considered as a pollution. So basically, if a Jew, for example, if I'm a Jew and another person is a higher caste Brahmin, by seeing, I don't pollute him. But if I go and hug him or touch him or shake hand him, he will be polluted. And how this pollution could be discarded, or how the pollution could be changed, also varies. So for example, if it's for higher caste men or higher caste women, the pollution could easily be discarded just by taking a bath or doing some work. But when it goes lower into the strata, like the downtrodden men were even killed for polluting other people. It is from that concept, many other concepts like manna pediyum, pulla pediyum ellam originate ചെയ്തു വന്നത്. So when we speak about social renaissance or social upliftment, we need to know that the caste system was so brutal. The caste system was so brutal against the lower strata and the higher strata. I mean, like, all the strata had a caste imposed upon them, and aityam imposed upon them. Among the Christians, which was established by St. Thomas with his arrival in 1852, they still follow this caste line. For example, I was actually reading through a book towards the end. If we have time, I'll show you that book. It was written by one of my professors itself, Father Joseph Chaco, Father Josie, who is the Pro Vice Chancellor of Christ University, deemed to be university. He's one of the editors of that book. In that it's an anthology of articles. In that one article, actually wonderfully explains how the Christians also took in many caste practices or many practices which belong to higher caste to get in par with the higher caste and have an equality or have a higher position in the society. So basically, for examples, there are many examples of inculturations which has happened in Christian society. For example, there is a Talimala, Mandragodi, and everything. And one of the most interesting thing I found in that is that there is a thing that in Christian churches, the candles which are burnt, which is not usually blown, they don't usually blow the candles to unlit it. They usually actually touch it or use a spoon or something to lit the fire. To unburn. Basically, he said that in that article, I think I forgot who the article was. He actually said that it came from a higher caste Hindu practice. So we need to understand how even the other communities, which was not initially in the fold of caste, came about and inculturated many of the caste practices to show that they are also belonging to some higher caste thing. Pollution rules were also observed in touching and sexual intercourses with lower caste except for Nair women. Casting out a person from a caste was a punishment for disobeying the caste rules regarding pollution. In some cases, they were even sold to slavery. That is where we said about Mananpedi and Pullapedi, where lower caste men could touch a higher caste women and she would be thrown out of her caste and status were gone. I think to sum up about the caste system, I think Robert Jeffries, who is a professor specializing in modern history and politics of India, quotes about a thing. Quotes a wife of a Christian missionary who wrote in 1860 that about how the caste system worked in India. A Nair can approach but not touch a Nambudiri Brahmin. An Ira must remain within the 36 paces off. A Pulaya slave 96 steps distant. An Irava must remain 12 steps away from a Nair, and Pulayan 66 steps off, and Pulayan some distance further still. The Pulayans and Parayas, who were the lowest of all, can approach but not touch, much less they eat with each other. So in caste hierarchy, there were distances which have to be maintained between castes. Nonetheless, the higher ranking communities did have some special social responsibility for those perceived to be their inferiors. For example, they could demand forced labor but had to provide food for such labor. And that brings us to another social practice which existed, which is actually so sad when we think about it. That is Uriyam Vela. Uriyam Vela was a practice that existed in Travancore and in Kerala as such. Uriyam Vela refers to the practice of forced labor for people belonging to lower sections of the caste. No payment were given to any of these people, but rather food were offered to the poor workers. And while mentioning about this, in that same article that I mentioned from the book, there is an instance of where these caste system were tried to remove by some of the progressive kings that have ruled. And there is an instance of, I forgot the year, there is an instance where Cochin king tried to remove the caste or tried to give some more positions, I think, to Nair people belonging to the Nair community. But the Christians and the Namudiris of the place of Cochin kingdom actually protested against it, saying that their social status will go down. So the caste ideology was so much engraved in that people that even the idea of lifting them up or telling them of a good place to be scared the hell out of the people who belong to higher caste. So usually people say that we have to spread the good news. But in Kerala's caste system, let alone spreading good news, they won't even be able to see together. So now I'm going to speak about some of the caste reformers who played an important role in making Kerala an egalitarian society that we can see today, like Sri Narayana Guru. There are many. I could go on or speak for thousands of hours about the social reformers who sprung up from Kerala, but I don't have time for that. So we are going to limit to a few social reformers. But as I mentioned in the start of the speech, it is just a start of a series of lives that would come, which would examine or do a postmortem on these social reformers in the coming days, and actually bring into the light of their wonderful work that they did. Because it is high time that we acknowledge and accept and understand these social reformers, to have a better understanding of the world. So, like, it is so sad that we don't know many of these social reformers. I was actually speaking to some of my friends the other day, and I actually was quoting a statement said by Mamburam Tangal, who was a social reformer. And the next question that they asked was, who is this guy? They all were from Kerala, educated in Kerala, and they didn't know who this person was. Our idea of social reformers are so much so confined to a handful of names. I could just name 3 or 4 names. And if I go beyond that, we would be questioning who they are. So I think Kerala history in the coming days would try to exhume these personalities and bring into their life. So the first person I would like to talk about is none other than Sri Narayana Guru. He's such a prominent figure in the social renaissance history of Kerala. Such a beautiful figure who was born into a Irava family of Ayurvedic physicians in erstwhile Tamangu kingdom. He was called Narayanan and commonly called Nanu. This Nanu or Narayanan became Narayana Guru and made the upliftment of a huge downtrodden society who were oppressed and whose basic rights were denied. So in that aspect, Sri Narayana Guru becomes an embodiment of upliftment and embodiment of social reformation. And that is why exactly that we see many of the social reformers, many of the textbooks actually mentioning about Sri Narayana Guru. But while we speak about Sri Narayana Guru, many of his ideologies or many of his ideas are not at all conveyed, but rather a study on his, rather a peripheral study is done about Sri Narayana Guru, which is quite sad, seeing that the role Sri Narayana Guru played in Indian society was so much. Sri Narayana Guru was born, as I mentioned before, Sri Narayana Guru was born into a Irava family in erstwhile Tamangu kingdom. And after, he did not confine his studies through to Sanskrit, he did not confine his readings through Sanskrit Ayurvedic texts, but he also had a huge pleasure to read about religious texts, which was actually prohibited to people who are belonging to Irava caste. Really, higher caste Brahmins were taught Upanishads and other religious texts. But here we see Sri Narayana Guru reading the text of reading Sanskrit text and having a aesthetic life, hermeneutical life. After his studies, he came back to his village where he taught school children and earned the name Nanu Ashar. So before coming Sri Narayana Guru, he was called Nanu Ashar, and many of the times in many of the books that I have read about him, he's still many authors still call him Nanu Guru. Nanu Guru, I have heard. And when we look into the life of Sri Narayana Guru, we can see how he opposed the idea of caste from a very young age. See, considering that a child of 14 or 13 or 12 opposing the idea of caste, it might be practical today, but I don't think from my reading it was practical back then. Today we could just take our phones and take our Instagram, hashtag I'm against, hashtag dash movement. But back then we didn't have hashtags or any other social media platform to protest. But here we see a special incident where Sri Narayana Guru, or back then Narayanan or Nanu, protesting against the idea of caste or diabolical law of untouchability. T. Bhaskaran in his book gives an instance where Guru entered the house of a Pulaya household when he saw the rice was boiling. Fire he actually goes into the house and takes the pot which was cooking rice and keeps it aside. Why it is important is because when we see the caste hierarchy in Kerala, Pulaya community was so below and Irava community was above Pulaya community. So by going into the house of Pulaya community, he violated the untouchability or the caste code by taking the food cooked by Pulaya women or Pulaya men. He actually again violated the caste boundaries, and by touching the pot, he again violated the caste boundaries. And somehow his parents came to know about it. His father came to know about it, who actually was a teacher. His father came to know about it. And the answer given by Sri Narayana Guru is really interesting. And this is my rough translation that I'm going to read. He answered, if I didn't do that, that home would have gone hungry. When we study economics, there is always a question of guns or butter. When we speak about government funding, which is more important, food or life? Here, Narayana Guru, we see giving more importance to the hunger of that Pulaya family than the idea of whether he would become polluted, or whether he would be polluted by going into that Pulaya household. So in that sense, he was a young revolutionary from his very young age. And I so wish I could say so much about his life instances, about his wandering days and his spending time with another great social reformer, Chattambi Swamigal, and his wonderful journeys that he had, and the divine enlightenment, through the process of divine enlightenment he gained at the age of 30. But we don't have time for that. I hope to end it by at least 8:40, and we could have some question and answer session. So I'm going to skip all that. I'm going to mention a few of the great things that Sri Narayana Guru has said and go to the next social reformer. So in 1888, while he was talking to a local physician, he was staying with that local physician. All these stories would be more in depth, would be analyzed in the coming up lives. So in 1888, while he was talking with a local physician, he went to temple with this physician. He belonged to a lower caste community, and when they went to the temple together, this local physician was not allowed to go inside temple because he belonged to a lower caste community, which was the practice back then. And Sri Narayana Guru asked a question: why can't we construct a temple of our own? Which is a fair question. So that question gave rise to Sri Narayana Guru constructing a temple at Arvipuram near Trivandrum, devoted to Lord Shiva, define the caste-based norm of that time. How did he define the caste-based norm? That is because it was only allowed for a Brahmin to enshrine an ideal in a temple. But here we see not non-Brahmin, that a person belonging to Irava community placing an ideal and worshipping Lord Shiva. And I don't quite exactly recall the verbatim. When higher caste men came to question, Prajit, if you remember the verbatim, please do correct me. When higher caste men came to question Sri Narayana Guru about what authority do you have to place the idol, he said, "Jnana Meljadiyude Shivane alla pradishtichadu, Shivadevane alla pradishtichadu. Then Eedava Shivaneyaanu pradishtichadu." I don't quite recall the verbatim, but it is on the same lines. So it is actually a bit comical, and he's in a sarcasm saying, see, the God you call Shiva is not a private property of your own, but of cosmic good for everyone. From that too, he just how he took the Shiva idol is actually interesting. He went to the river, he took up a stone, came back, said the prayers, and enshrined the idol. So in that sense, he was a revolutionary. And from the placing of Shiva, we see a transformation, or we see how he tells that our intellect should work a bit more harder, and that we ourselves are symbolism of God. After reaching Shabrimala, after going through all these hardships, and after we enter the Padanattam Padi, what we read is Tattvamasi. In that sense, in a similar way, Sri Narayana Guru used mirror instead of idols in one of the temples he built in Kalivankodu. This was a symbol for his teaching that divine dwells within every one of us. ഞാനാണ് ദൈവം, നീയാണ് ദൈവം. Thinking back, I'll just take one moment to go a bit off topic, not off topic as such. But thinking back, a caste hierarchy would have not been there if I consider the lowest caste person as a god or as a replica of myself. So in that sense, it is also a or a reminder that caste is man-made and not God-made. He also became the most ardent supporter for reevaluators of Advaita Vedanta and Adi Shankara's non-duality concept. Srinarayana Guru wrote several novels in variety of languages. Advaita Deepika, Asrama, and few of are among the few of other works he did. He was a brilliant social reformer who led a charge for universal temple access and societal problems such as discrimination against untouchables. He was one of the prominent figures who fought in Vaikam agitation. I think it's time for us to delve into the next social reformer. He was known as the Pulaya King. He was called as a Pulaya King by Mahatma Gandhi, and Indira Gandhi called him India's greatest son. It is none other than Mahatma Iyengali, who pioneered social reform, who was a pioneer in social reform, who worked in the emancipation of the Pulaya community. Born to Ayyappan and Mala on 28th August 1863, he belonged to the Pulaya community. In the previous instance of Srinarayana Guru, we mentioned how Pulaya community was the lowest strata in the social hierarchy. The Pulaya community in Travancore was considered as untouchables, or as we told in the start of the speech, as Aitya Jadi or Tindal Jadi. And he belonged to that. And they were at the bottom of social hierarchy. Here we see Iyengali as a ray hope, a voice for change to end discrimination, especially in the field of education and public space and social interaction. 1893 marks an important year in social history and Kerala history. Iyengali in 1893 rode a bullock cart, which was not allowed for Dalit people. Bullock cart was seen as an epitome of grandeur or of higher status in social society. But here we see a Dalit man or a man belonging to the lower strata of or untouchable strata of social hierarchy in India, in Kerala, riding a bullock cart, wearing dress as an higher caste man, wearing white color dress. That is to be marked here importantly, wearing white color dress, and which was not allowed. I think here it is important to know that every people would not be interested in reading pages on history, but films also do convey, films, documentaries also do convey a huge chunk of history. So I was actually watching the movie Pattombadam Nuttandu. I don't know how many of you guys have watched Pattombadam Nuttandu. Kandu. Chedakando. Kandu. It actually, I'm not usually a big fan of movies or history being made into movies, because many of the times the history is wrongly portrayed in movies. But Pattombadam Nuttandu was actually able to portray to a certain extent the society that existed in the society in 19th century. There, they wonderfully mentioned how the women and men were not allowed to cover below their ankles, and women were not allowed to cover their upper body, and men also were not allowed to cover their upper body. Men had to give a tax to have a mustache. Today, I don't even say to my parents that I have a mustache, or I don't even have to take permission from anyone to have a mustache. Whereas back in 19th century, we have to give tax to have a mustache or cover upper body. Today, I wouldn't even go outside of I live in a hostel. I wouldn't even go outside of my hostel without wearing a shirt or t-shirt or something, without covering my upper body. But it was something which was denied to men and women who were living in 19th century. So in that sense, Iyengali was a person who redefined these social norms. He wore wonderful grandeur dress and rode a bullock cart into the streets of Trivandrum, which actually caused a huge ruckus. But this man persisted on, which actually helped the liberation of Pulaya community. He also questioned the discrimination in dressing pattern, and Dalit were and the idea of women were not allowed to wear kallumala, and which also led to a revolt.
Just
Ayankali led a rally for the right of untouchables, which came to be known as Walk of Freedom. Today, in our context, we only know about changes or marches in United States of America or Washington March. Actually, like we all study about only Washington March, and I have a dream speech by Martin Luther King Jr. But here we also see a walk of freedom that was done by Ayankali to speak about, to uplift the Pulaya community. All this helped in Pulaya community gaining right to access to roads except to the ones that was leading to the temple. Here we also have to connect it with the Vaikam Satyagraha, which Srinarayana Guru led in the years later. Although the biggest achievement of Ayankali was the achievement of right for education gained through Ayankali's farmers' protest. We only know about the farmers' protest that has happened in New Delhi, but there was a huge farmers' protest that happened in Kerala. And the slogan that Ayankali raised, if our kids are not allowed to enter your schools, your paddy lands will grow more weeds. In the Malayalam translation, I don't quite remember, but it roughly translates to നിങ്ങൾ ഞങ്ങളുടെ കുട്ടികളെ പഠിപ്പിച്ചില്ലെങ്കിൽ നിങ്ങളുടെ പാഠങ്ങൾ നെല്ലുകളില്ലാതെ വരണ്ടു കിടക്കുമെന്നാണ് പറഞ്ഞത്. Hence, on March 1st, 1910, Pulaya children were admitted to schools. He also started Kutti Pallikudams for people belonging to oppressed class. I was actually awestruck when I was reading through the speeches Ayankali did on Legislature Assembly of Travancore, which he was a part of. Not the audacity, the courage and the guts that he had to make many of the statements actually awestruck me. Ayankali also became the member, as I mentioned, Ayankali was a member of Srimulam Praja Popular Assembly of Praja Sabha. He also found Sadhu Jana Paribalana Sangam, and he passed away on 1941, June 18. In 2019, the VJT Hall or Victoria Jubilee Town Hall was renamed as Mahatma Ayankali Memorial Hall. Next social reformer that we are going to see is Kuriakose Elias Chavra, who was born in 1805 and who passed away in 1871. We celebrated his feast day the start of this month, that is 3rd January 1871, and his birthday, it was actually yesterday, 10th January 1805. So Kuriakose Elias Chavra, who was declared or who was canonized as a saint by Pope Francis in 2014, was born in Kainagari in Kerala to a Nasrani Christian family who was son of Ikku or Kuriakose and Mariama Topil. And in the start of the speech, we talked about how Christians had a higher position in the social hierarchy. But why a priest born in Kerala becomes important is because, although having that higher position in caste, he was not happy with how the people who was below him was treated. All the other social reformers that we see are from the from lower strata of the society. But here we see a person belonging to a higher strata actually speaking about injustice. Here, I think we are going to do an in-depth study of Kuriakose Elias Chavra in the coming days. But here I would like to focus upon the idea of education that he propagated, which many people are still reaping benefit out of. Kuriakose Elias Chavra started an institution for Sanskrit studies in Mandaram at 1846. A tutor to warrior community was brought from Thrissur to teach at Sanskrit institution. Father Chavra also took initiative to start schools in nearby village, and this school admitted all members belonging to all caste hierarchy. Chapel and school for Pulaya caste was set up on Arpukkara and many other places. It was during time of Bishop Bernardus, and he issued a circular in 1856, which would act as a tremendous cause of education. Today we so proudly speaks about 100% literacy in Kerala. Am I audible?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, sorry, I had a call in between. We today proudly speaks about the 100% literacy in Kerala, but it was due to a circular that has happened in 1856 that we can proudly boast about the 100% literacy, which would act as a root cause for this, which is, he said that with every parish, the circular stated, every parish should establish educational institution or they would be debarred from the communion, which actually gave rise to the idea of Pallikudam, or a teaching institute near churches. This acted as a catalyst for social reformation for the educational upliftment of Kerala. His idea of midday meal, which was later adopted by Sir C.P. Ramaswamy Iyer, which we would definitely speak about in the next slide. Sir C.P. Ramaswamy Iyer, which was adopted by him, actually revolutionized the midday meal scheme in India. Even today, people still reap benefit out of the idea that he started. So in that sense, Kuriakose Elias Chavra was able to redefine or eliminate the caste boundaries which was kept in the field of education. He also started a printing press, and he also initiated the idea of pediary, which is a handful of rice which would be used to feed the poor. So in this aspect, the Pallikudams, or the Sanskrit institution, which which revolutionized education in India. He also started the first Indian priest order, which was known as Carmelites of Mary Immaculate, that is CMI. The CMI priests are today still a catalyst to many of the educational institutions and other social movements, which I'm actually reaping the benefit out of, which I am actually studying an institution started by CMI fathers. So in that sense, they are still, the social reformers are still relevant today in today's context. And the next person that I would like to introduce here is Palakunnathu Abraham Malpan. This is a social reformer which is not usually heard about. He lived from 1796 to 1845. Palakunnathu Abraham Malpan was a social religious reformer who spoke out against the evil practices that was happening within the Christian community. He was born in Maraman near Tiruvalla. And why he is important? Because all the religions that we see existed, or all the religions we see gave importance to language which was not known to the masses. So basically, for example, in Hinduism, we had the idea of Sanskrit language, which was prominent and which was not known to the masses. And when it comes to Christianity, it was Syriac language. We see Abraham Malpan coming in and redefining the caste boundaries and saying that, no, the idea of worship should happen in language which is known to all the people, and which should be understood by all the people. So in that sense, Abraham Malpan was a revolutionary man who revolutionized the idea of religion in India. He also played an important role in deconstructing the idea of grandeur or celebrating so much. The next person I would like to introduce is Wakam Maulavi. Wakam Maulavi was a Muslim social reformer who actually spoke out against the practice of many Muslim practices and gave so much due importance to the education of Muslim women. Muslim women were not allowed to get education. But here we see Wakam Maulavi taking the prominent role in women's education in India. And we also see the great institution of Nangeli, who who took bold stands by chopping her breast off because of breast tax, which existed in our society. Many of these social reformers were earlier explained in our post by Kerala History, which you could see in our pages. Such brave women and men existed in our society. Still, we seldom know about them. And I hope this will be a start to many more initiatives that will come to exhumate these personalities and to understand them. I think with that, I'll come into a conclusion of today's session. Any questions? Prajit, do you want to add anything?
I'd like to add a few things actually. So, for example, there is this Tarishabali inscription from the 9th century, right? 9th and 10th century.
Yes.
So in that inscription, they actually talk about slaves, how much each type of slave cost. Like, for example, I think a male slave was 100 units of currency and female slaves were 70 units of currency. So you can see how slavery and bondage, farming and labor, that existed long back. Even like a couple of thousand years ago, you still had all these hierarchies in place. So now another thing I'd like to talk about is the effect of language on this, the effect of casteism on language. So I think many of you know about the story of Jnanapana. So for example, there was a person called Poondanam who wrote in the 15th or 16th century. He wrote actually a song dedicated to Guru Vairappan in Malayalam, in pure Malayalam. He wrote a song, and this was actually his guru was Bhattattiripad. And he refused to even read this, saying that it's not holy because it was written in Malayalam and not written in Sanskrit. So again, you can see that there was this hierarchy even when it comes to language. So I think Poondanam was a revolutionary in that way because he proved that you don't need a higher holy language to be able to worship God or to be to be closer to God. So he wrote in Malayalam. He wrote Jnanapana, which is really a valuable piece of work actually when it comes to.
Sorry to interrupt you there. I'm really, really sorry. But I think we also have to connect that with Abraham Alpan, who said that Malayalam should be the medium of worship. And he had to face so much issues, including possible debarration from the church, for which there is no actual historical evidences. But thinking that, saying that a prayer in Malayalam could bring in so much wrath upon a person is actually so sad to see. And I would like to, I forgot to mention about this person. There was a person called Koshi Katanar, who was the first martyr for the Reformation movement that happened in Malangara Church. The Malangara Matoma, he was a priest, he was a social reformer, belonged to Malangara Matoma Syrian Church. And he was a brother, I think he was a brother of Kaidel Givargis Malpan, who was a social reformer along with Abraham Alpan, who initiated worship in Malayalam. So basically what happened is, when Koshi Katanar just said few prayers, not even the whole thing, few prayers, that is, I think a Pramiona or Sedero, which is part of the liturgical structure, or I think it was Kauma prayer, he was stoned and he was brutally beaten out and he passed away. So that idea that if the prayers are not said in Syriac, the God could not please, was so much so engraved in our idea. And in the last session with Malavika ma'am, we actually also spoke about, I don't know if you remember, we also spoke about how many of the curse words that are available in Malayalam are actually derogatory to people belonging to lower caste. Mind the language, guys. There is going to be words which is not suitable for kids. But the terminology, Pulayadi Mone, was actually derogatory to Pulaya community. And all the curse words that we see is actually either derogatory to women or lower caste. So in that sense, thank you, Ajija, for bringing that up. And Vinil Paul, a historian, has actually done so much work on this.
So another couple of things to say. So one is that I don't know if you guys saw the Malayalam movie Pulu, which was released recently with Mammootty last year, I think. So there's a very crucial, I mean, I don't want to give spoilers, but there's a very crucial scene in the movie where one of the characters says that he wants to name his kid as Nangeli. So Nangeli is the woman who Joel mentioned behind the Charnar revolt, actually, where breast tax was levied upon women to cover their breasts, and Nangeli chopped off her breasts to protest against this custom, and the revolts that resulted from this caused the Travancore king to change the rule entirely. It's also there in the movie 19th century. പക്ഷെ പുഴു എന്നുള്ള സിനിമയില് നങ്ങേലി എന്ന പേര് കൊടുക്കും, കുട്ടിക്ക് ഞാൻ നങ്ങേലി എന്ന പേര് കൊടുക്കാൻ പോവാണെന്ന് പറയുമ്പോഴാണ് മമ്മൂട്ടിയുടെ ക്യാരക്ടർക്ക് അത്രയും രോഷമാണ് വരുന്നത്. എന്തുകൊണ്ടാന്ന് വെച്ച് കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ ആ നങ്ങേലി എന്നുള്ള പേര് ഒരു ലോവർ കാസ്റ്റ് പേരായിട്ട് അസോസിയേറ്റ് ഇരിക്കുക. അപ്പൊ പണ്ടത്തെ കാലത്ത് നമ്മൾ നോക്കിക്കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ ഈ പേരുകൾ ഇടുന്നതും അങ്ങനെ തന്നെയാണ്. അതായത് ഓരോ ജാതിക്കും ഓരോ പേര് എന്നുള്ള പോലെയായിരുന്നു. അപ്പൊ ആ പേര് കേട്ടാൽ തന്നെ ഏത് ജാതിയിലെ ആളാണെന്ന് നമുക്ക് മനസ്സിലാക്കാൻ പറ്റും. അപ്പൊ അതിലും ഒരു ജാതീയത ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു.
അല്ല, ഇപ്പൊ പേരിടുന്നതിനകത്ത് ഏറ്റവും വലിയ കോമഡി നമ്മൾ ആദ്യം പറഞ്ഞ പോലെ എന്ത് യജമാനെന്ന് തോന്നുന്നോ അതാണ് വിളിക്കുന്നത്. ആളെ കണ്ടിട്ട് പോലും ഇല്ല, എന്നാലും വിളിക്കും കറപ്പ ഇല്ലെങ്കിൽ കുഞ്ഞ. See, the higher caste man or the slave owner hasn't seen the kid, but he's calling Karamba, and that is actually so sad.
It is. And I think a couple of things were missing as well. So the Vaikam Satyagraha was missing.
Vaikam? Yeah. I think we have to, like, we didn't have time. I wanted to convince him within 1 hour.
I think we should have more discussions because there are more people that we haven't talked about today. But yeah, so I think one more correction about the Kallimala Satyagraham. So in that, the issue was that lower caste women were not allowed to wear gold or silver ornaments, actually. So they had to wear stone necklaces. So adana Kallimala. So then they basically protested by removing that Kallimala, and they said, we will wear gold, we will wear silver, you can't stop us. So that was the Kallimala revolt.
Yeah, thank you for correcting. നമ്മള് ഇപ്പം ഒരു കുറെ പേര് ഇമ്പോർട്ടന്റ്, ജസ്റ്റ് ഒന്ന് പേരെങ്കിലും മെൻഷൻ ചെയ്തില്ലെങ്കിൽ തെറ്റായി പോകുന്ന കുറെ പേരുകളുണ്ട്. ഇപ്പം ഈ അയ്യങ്കാളിയെ പറ്റിയൊക്കെ നമ്മൾ ജസ്റ്റ് ഒന്ന് ടച്ച് ചെയ്തിട്ട് പെരിഫറിയിൽ പോലും നമ്മൾ എത്തിയിട്ടില്ല. He's so much a complex man that we haven't even touched his side. നമ്മള് മാമ്പുറം തങ്ങള് പറഞ്ഞില്ല, വൈകുണ്ഠ സ്വാമികൾ പറഞ്ഞില്ല, ആറാട്ടുപുഴ വേലായുധ പണിക്കർ, which is a prominent figure. ആറാട്ടുപുഴ വേലായുധ പണിക്കർ തൊടാനേ പറ്റിയിട്ടില്ല. I think we are going to do separate live on that person itself.
Yeah.
This could be just an introduction to the coming up lives about മന്നത്ത് പത്മനാഭൻ. ഞാനിങ്ങനെ എഴുതി വെച്ചിട്ടുണ്ടായിരുന്നു, വട്ടപ്പുറം പി കെ ബാവ, പാമ്പാടി ജോൺ ജോസഫ്, അങ്ങനെ എത്രയോ പേരുകളുണ്ട്. അതിനകത്ത് ഏറ്റവും നമ്മള് ഒരു സെഷനായിട്ട് തന്നെ ചെയ്യേണ്ട ഒരാളാണ് ഇപ്പൊ പറഞ്ഞ നങ്ങേലി. ഹൗ നങ്ങേലി ബിക്കം an epitome of struggle against caste system. Any questions? We didn't see any questions. We don't have much people. So, Ajay, anything to add?
No, I think we can discuss more in the next sessions. We can take specifically and talk about them.
Sure. We have to show this. That, see, one of the things that I notice is that always 99.9% of times I can assure you that if we ask people about these social reformers that we named, they would be unknown to the population or the masses. Why is the question that we need to ask first. Are we teaching them about our past? The history is a dialogue between present is a dialogue between past and future. And all the scenarios that we see all the past can actually structure out the future. So in that sense, why are we not teaching our future, the present generation, our past is a question that we need to ask. And what are we doing in order to teach is also another question that we need to ask. So in that sense, I think in the coming days, we will do that, hopefully.
Yeah.
Even if it at least help one person, I think our job is mission success.
Yes.
Yes. So, should we wind up?
Yeah, I think we can wind up. And we will be posting a video on YouTube, right?
Yeah. So this live would be posted in Instagram as well as in YouTube and our Facebook group. So please do follow our pages. We actually will post all these content and many more. Because behind every work, behind every of these sessions, many work goes into every post or every sessions like this. So please do follow us and please do wait for our upcoming live sessions.
Yeah. Thank you for following.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Good night.